The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the weathered ranch house, and Olivia Patterson gripped the window frame to keep from tumbling forward as dust billowed around the wheels in thick, choking clouds. She had traveled 3 weeks from Philadelphia to reach this remote corner of Montana territory, answering an advertisement for a temporary housekeeper position that promised decent wages and respectable accommodations. What she found when she stepped down onto the hard, packed earth was a sprawling cattle ranch that stretched as far as her eyes could see, with mountains rising purple and majestic in the distance, and a sky so impossibly blue it made her heart ache with unexpected longing. A tall man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on faded denims that had seen better days. He was broad-shouldered and lean, with sun-darkened skin and hair the color of wheat at harvest time. When he removed his hat, Olivia noticed the way his eyes caught the afternoon light, turning them a shade of green she had never seen before, like new grass after spring rain. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most, with a face that was handsome in a rugged, weathered way that spoke of long days under an unforgiving sun. "Miss Patterson." His voice was deep and warm, with a slight hesitation that suggested he did not often speak to women. "I'm Quincy Young. I own this place. Thank you for making the journey out here." Olivia smoothed her traveling dress, suddenly aware of how rumpled and dusty she must appear after weeks of rattling across the country in cramped stage coaches and dusty trains. "Mr. Young, your advertisement said the position would last approximately 1 month, until your regular housekeeper returns from caring for her sick sister." "That's right. Martha's been with me for 5 years, but her sister down in Billings took ill with pneumonia. The doctor says she'll need at least 6 weeks of care, maybe more. I can't keep the house myself and run the ranch too. Spring roundup is coming, and I've got 3 hired hands who need feeding 3 times a day, plus all the regular work that keeps a place like this running." He gestured toward the house with his hat, and Olivia noticed calluses on his hands that spoke of hard labor. "I know it's not Philadelphia, but the work is honest and the pay is fair." The house was larger than Olivia had expected, a solid 2-story structure built from local timber with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Someone had planted rose bushes near the steps, though they looked neglected and overgrown. The windows were dusty, and she could see through the open door that the interior was in desperate need of a woman's touch. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Young," Olivia said, lifting her chin slightly. "I wouldn't have traveled this far if I were." Something flickered in his eyes, an expression she could not quite read. Respect, perhaps, or curiosity. "I'll show you to your room. You'll have the upstairs back bedroom with a view of the mountains. The hands bunk in the smaller building behind the barn, so you'll have your privacy. Meals are at 6 in the morning, noon, and 6 in the evening. The men aren't fancy eaters, but they appreciate good cooking and plenty of it." Olivia followed him into the house, her boots echoing on the wooden floorboards. The main room was spacious but cluttered, with newspapers stacked on tables, saddles draped over chairs, and a layer of dust that made her fingers itch for a cleaning cloth. The kitchen beyond was worse, with dishes piled in the wash basin and mud tracked across the floor. But the bones of the house were good, with sturdy furniture and large windows that let in the afternoon light. "I know it's a mess," Quincy said, and for the first time she heard embarrassment in his voice. "Martha kept it proper, but since she's been gone, we've been batching it. I'm better with horses than housekeeping." "I can see that," Olivia said, then softened her words with a small smile. "Nothing that cannot be fixed with soap, water, and some elbow grease." He showed her upstairs to a simple but clean bedroom with an iron-framed bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a wooden wardrobe for her clothes. True to his word, the window looked out over the mountains, and even in her exhaustion, Olivia felt something in her chest expand at the sight of all that wild, open space. "I'll have one of the hands bring up your trunk," Quincy said from the doorway. "Take your time settling in. Supper won't be fancy tonight, probably just beans and cornbread, but tomorrow you can start fresh." After he left, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. She was 23 years old, unmarried, and had just traveled halfway across the country to keep house for a rancher she had never met. Her mother would have been horrified. Her father, God rest his soul, would have understood. He had always encouraged her independent spirit, even when it made her unsuitable for the society life her mother had planned. That evening, Olivia met the 3 ranch hands who worked for Quincy. There was old Pete, a grizzled man in his 60s who had been working cattle since before the war, and the twin brothers, Jake and Jesse Miller, both 20 years old with matching grins and an easy way about them that suggested they had never met a stranger. They were polite to Olivia, calling her Madam and removing their hats when they entered the house, but she could see the curiosity in their eyes as they sized up the new housekeeper from back east. The beans were indeed simple, but Olivia found she was hungry enough not to care. She sat at the kitchen table while the men ate in the dining room, listening to their low conversation about cattle and fence lines, and a problem with coyotes near the north pasture. Quincy's voice carried above the others, calm and authoritative, the voice of a man who knew his business and expected to be respected for it. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed with moonlight streaming through the window, Olivia thought about the man who had hired her. There was something compelling about Quincy Young, something that went beyond his physical appearance. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that spoke of a man who had carved out his place in this harsh land through determination and hard work. She found herself wondering about his story, how he had come to own this ranch, whether he had family, or if he was alone in the world like she was. She pushed the thoughts away and turned onto her side, pulling the quilt up to her chin. This was a temporary position, she reminded herself. 1 month, maybe 6 weeks at most, and then she would return to Philadelphia and find proper employment there. She had no business wondering about Quincy Young's personal life, or noticing the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Morning came early on a Montana cattle ranch. Olivia woke to the sound of roosters crowing and men's voices calling to each other across the yard. She dressed quickly in a simple calico dress and apron, twisted her dark hair into a practical bun at the nape of her neck, and hurried downstairs to begin her first day of work. The kitchen was cold, the stove unlit. Olivia set about building a fire, grateful for the skills she had learned during the lean years after her father's death when they could no longer afford servants. Soon, she had flames crackling and a pot of coffee brewing, its rich scent filling the kitchen. She found eggs in the cold cellar, along with bacon and fresh milk. There was flour in the pantry and sourdough starter in a crock, which meant she could make biscuits. By the time the men came in for breakfast, drawn by the smell of cooking food, Olivia had laid out a spread that made their eyes widen with appreciation. Fluffy biscuits, crispy bacon, scrambled eggs with fresh butter, and strong black coffee. She served them efficiently, refilling coffee cups and bringing more biscuits as they were devoured. "Miss Patterson, this is the finest breakfast I've had in a month," Pete said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand before remembering his manners and reaching for the napkin Olivia had provided. Quincy ate more slowly, but she noticed he took 3 helpings and 2 extra biscuits. When the meal was finished and the men had headed out to begin their day's work, he lingered in the kitchen doorway. "Thank you," he said simply. "Martha's a good cook, but those biscuits might be even better than hers. Don't tell her I said that." Olivia felt an unexpected warmth at the compliment. "Your secret is safe with me, Mr. Young. Call me Quincy. We're not formal out here." He settled his hat on his head and turned to leave, then paused. "If you need anything from town, make a list. I'm riding into Custer tomorrow for supplies." The days fell into a rhythm. Olivia rose before dawn to start breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and restoring order to the neglected house, prepared dinner for the hungry ranch hands, and used her afternoons for baking, mending, and the endless small tasks that kept a household running. The work was harder than anything she had done in Philadelphia, but she found a satisfaction in it that surprised her. There was something honest about this labor, something real and tangible that her previous life of social calls and needlework had lacked. Quincy was gone most days from sunrise to sunset, working alongside his men to prepare for the spring roundup. But Olivia became aware of his presence even when she could not see him. She would catch glimpses of him in the corral, gentling a young horse with patience and skill that made the animal calm under his hands. She would hear his voice carrying across the yard as he directed the day's work, always fair but firm. And in the evenings, after supper was cleared away, he would sometimes sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and watch the sun set over the mountains. And Olivia found herself glancing out the window more often than was strictly necessary. A week after her arrival, Olivia discovered the rose bushes near the porch steps were not as dead as they appeared. With some careful pruning and regular watering, they began to show signs of life. She was kneeling in the dirt, working the soil with her bare hands when Quincy rode up on his bay gelding. "Those were my mother's roses," he said, dismounting with easy grace. "I thought they'd died after she passed." Olivia sat back on her heels, pushing a stray lock of hair from her face with the back of her hand. "How long ago did she die?" "3 years now. Influenza. My father went 5 years before that, thrown from a horse." He crouched down beside her, studying the plants with new interest. "She loved those roses, brought the cuttings all the way from Tennessee when they came west after the war. They're strong stock," Olivia said softly. "They just needed some care." Quincy's eyes met hers, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then he stood abruptly, brushing dirt from his denims. "I'll have one of the boys bring you some compost from the barn. Roses like that." That night at supper, Olivia noticed Quincy watching her as she moved around the kitchen, serving the men and refilling coffee cups. It was not an uncomfortable attention, but it made her aware of herself in a way she had not been before, conscious of every movement and gesture. The second week brought warmer weather and longer days. Olivia threw open all the windows in the house, letting the fresh mountain air sweep through rooms that had been closed up too long. She beat the rugs, washed the curtains, and polished the furniture until it gleamed. The house began to feel like a home again, welcoming and cared for. One afternoon, while Olivia was hanging laundry in the yard, a group of riders approached the ranch. She shaded her eyes against the sun, watching as Quincy rode out to meet them. The conversation looked tense, with sharp gestures and raised voices carrying across the distance. When the riders finally left, Quincy's expression was troubled as he headed toward the house. "Everything all right?" Olivia asked, though she knew it was not her place to pry into ranch business. Quincy removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had learned meant he was worried or frustrated. "Nothing I can't handle. There's been some dispute about water rights with the neighboring ranch." Horace Kimball thinks because his spread is bigger, he has more claim to the creek that runs through both our properties. It's been going on for months. What will you do? What I've been doing. Stand my ground. My father filed the proper claims on this land back in '68, and the water rights are legal and clear. Kimball's just trying to push me out because he wants to expand his operation. He replaced his hat and gave her a tired smile. Nothing for you to worry about, Miss Patterson. But Olivia did worry. That night, she lay awake thinking about the tension she had seen in Quincy's shoulders, the concern that had darkened his green eyes. She told herself it was natural to care about the troubles of her employer, but she knew it was more than that. In 2 short weeks, Quincy Young had become important to her in ways that went far beyond a simple business arrangement. The 3rd week brought an unexpected visitor. Olivia was in the kitchen, up to her elbows in bread dough, when she heard a woman's voice calling from the yard. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to the door to find an elegant woman in a fine riding habit dismounting from a glossy black mare. The woman was beautiful, with dark hair styled in the latest fashion, and a figure that her tailored outfit displayed to perfection. "You must be the temporary housekeeper," the woman said, looking Olivia up and down with an expression that managed to be both pleasant and dismissive. "I'm Catherine Sterling. My father owns the ranch adjacent to this property." "Olivia Patterson," Olivia said, trying not to feel shabby in her flour-dusted dress. "Mr. Young is out with the cattle, but you're welcome to wait inside." "Oh, I know where Quincy is," Catherine said with a laugh that sounded like bells. "I always know where Quincy is. We've known each other since we were children. Our fathers were friends, despite the current unpleasantness over water rights." She swept into the house without waiting for an invitation, looking around with the ease of someone who had been there many times before. Olivia followed, feeling an uncomfortable tightness in her chest as Catherine moved through the rooms, commenting on the changes Olivia had made. "You've certainly cleaned the place up," Catherine said, running a finger along the mantelpiece as if checking for dust. "Poor Quincy, trying to manage without Martha. Of course, once we're married, I'll hire a proper staff to maintain the house. This is far too much work for one woman." The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. Married. Well, it's not official yet, but everyone knows it's just a matter of time. Catherine settled herself on the sofa with practiced grace. "Our marriage would unite the 2 largest ranches in this part of Montana. It makes perfect sense, and Quincy's always been a sensible man." Olivia forced her face to remain neutral, though her heart was hammering in her chest. "I'll make some tea," she managed to say, fleeing to the kitchen before Catherine could see the tears that threatened to spill over. She stood at the stove, hands shaking as she filled the kettle, and told herself she was being foolish. Of course a man like Quincy would have someone like Catherine in his life. What had she thought? That a temporary housekeeper from Philadelphia could mean anything to a successful Montana rancher. She was here for a job, nothing more, and in a few more weeks she would be gone, and he would marry beautiful Catherine Sterling and unite their ranches and live happily ever after. But when Quincy came in an hour later and found Catherine waiting for him, Olivia watched carefully from the kitchen and saw no particular warmth in his greeting. He was polite but reserved, and when Catherine mentioned staying for supper, he made an excuse about needing to ride out to check on the north pasture before dark. After Catherine left, looking displeased, Quincy came into the kitchen where Olivia was preparing vegetables for the evening meal. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. "Whatever Catherine told you, don't give it too much weight. She has a tendency to see things the way she wants them to be rather than how they are." Olivia kept her eyes on the carrots she was chopping. "It's not my place to have opinions about your personal life, Mr. Young." Quincy, he corrected, moving closer. And I'm telling you because I don't want you to think something that isn't true. Catherine and I are not engaged. We're not even courting. Our fathers hoped we might make a match, but that was their dream, not mine. She looked up then, and found him standing closer than she expected, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, close enough to smell the scent of leather and sunshine and something uniquely him. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked softly. Quincy opened his mouth as if to answer, then seemed to think better of it. "I just wanted you to know," he said finally, and left the kitchen, leaving Olivia more confused than ever. That night, the wind picked up, howling around the corners of the house and rattling the windows in their frames. Olivia lay in bed listening to it, feeling the house creak and settle around her. She must have finally drifted off because she woke suddenly to the sound of someone pounding on her door. "Miss Patterson," it was Quincy's voice, urgent and loud. "We need you downstairs. One of the horses got out and kicked Jesse. He's hurt bad." Olivia threw on her wrapper and hurried down to find the kitchen full of worried men. Jesse Miller lay on the table, his face pale and twisted with pain, his left leg bent at an unnatural angle. His brother Jake stood beside him, holding his hand, while Pete and Quincy worked to cut away his torn pants leg. "The nearest doctor is 3 hours away in Custer," Quincy said, his voice tight with worry. "I don't think we can move him that far without making it worse." "Miss Patterson, you said you helped nurse your father before he died. Do you know anything about setting bones?" Olivia's mind raced. She had indeed helped care for her father during his final illness, and before that, she had spent time volunteering at a hospital in Philadelphia. She had seen broken bones before, had watched doctors set them, but she had never done it herself. "I've seen it done," she said, moving to the table and examining Jesse's leg carefully. "It's a clean break, which is good, but it needs to be set properly or it won't heal right." "Tell me what you need," Quincy said, his eyes meeting hers with absolute trust that steadied her nerves. Working quickly, Olivia directed the men to bring her supplies. Clean sheets torn into strips for binding, 2 straight boards from the wood pile for splints, a bottle of whiskey for both sterilization and to dull Jesse's pain. She had Quincy and Pete hold the young man's shoulders while Jake gripped his brother's hand and looked away. "This is going to hurt," Olivia told Jesse honestly, "but it will hurt much worse if we don't fix it now." Jesse nodded, his jaw clenched, and took a long drink from the whiskey bottle. Then Olivia gripped his leg with firm, steady hands and pulled, feeling for the moment when the bones aligned. Jesse cried out, a sound that tore at her heart, but she kept working, setting the bones and quickly binding the splints in place before the muscles could tense again. When it was done, Jesse had passed out from the pain, which was probably a mercy. Olivia cleaned her shaking hands and stepped back, suddenly aware that she was in her nightclothes with her hair loose around her shoulders, surrounded by men. But none of them were looking at her with anything but respect and gratitude. "You saved his leg," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "Maybe saved his life. We can't never thank you enough." "We should still get the doctor out here when we can," Olivia said, pulling her wrapper tighter around herself, "to make sure it's healing properly." "I'll ride to town at first light," Quincy said. He was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, something between admiration and something deeper. "Miss Patterson, I don't know how to thank you." "It's Olivia," she said softly, "and you don't need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Quincy said firmly. "Not anyone could have done what you just did. You were brave and steady, and you knew what to do. You're remarkable." The word hung in the air between them as Pete helped Jake carry the unconscious Jesse to the bunkhouse. When they were alone in the kitchen, With the bloody cloths and medical supplies scattered across the table, Quincy moved closer to Olivia. "I mean it," he said quietly. "I've never met anyone quite like you. You came out here thinking you'd just be cooking and cleaning for a month, and instead you've brought this whole place back to life. You fixed my mother's roses. You've made this house feel like a home again. And tonight, you saved one of my men without hesitation or fear. You're not like any woman I've ever known." Olivia's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I'm just doing what needed to be done." "No," Quincy said, and now he was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You're doing more than that. Much more. Olivia, I know you've only been here 3 weeks. I know this is probably foolish and too fast and you'll think I'm crazy, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel." "Quincy," she whispered, but she did not know what else to say. "I'm falling in love with you," he said, the words tumbling out as if he had been holding them back for too long. "Maybe I've been falling since the moment you stepped off that stagecoach with your chin up and your eyes bright, ready to take on whatever this hard land could throw at you. I know I have no right to say this. I know you're planning to go back to Philadelphia when Martha returns, but I had to tell you. I had to let you know that you've changed everything for me." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "You think you're the only one feeling this way? I've been trying so hard not to fall in love with you, telling myself it was impossible, that I was here for a job and nothing more. But every morning I wake up excited to see you. Every evening I find excuses to be where you are. I notice everything about you, the way you care for your animals, the way you treat your men with respect, the way you look at the mountains as if they give you peace. I've fallen in love with you too, even though I tried not to, even though it makes no sense at all." Quincy reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his calloused hand. "Then stay. Don't go back to Philadelphia. Stay here with me." "For how long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Forever," he said simply. "Marry me, Olivia. I know it's fast and I know it's crazy, but out here we don't have time to waste on long courtships and social niceties. Life is hard and short and uncertain, and when you find something real and true, you grab hold of it with both hands and you don't let go. I love you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every evening. I want to build a life with you, here on this ranch under these mountains. Say yes. Please say yes." Olivia felt as if her heart might burst from the sheer joy flooding through her. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll stay. I love you, Quincy Young." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms wrapping around his neck and his pulling her close against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quincy rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to ride to town tomorrow and bring back the doctor for Jesse and the preacher for us," he said. "If that's too fast, if you need more time, I'll wait, but not very patiently." Olivia laughed, feeling lighter and happier than she had felt in years. "No more waiting. We've already wasted 3 weeks being too stubborn to admit how we felt." They stood in the kitchen holding each other as the wind howled outside, and the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows. Olivia thought about how strange and wonderful life was, how a month ago she had been in Philadelphia with no prospects and no hope, and now she was in Montana territory in the arms of a man she loved, about to become the wife of a rancher and the mistress of this wild, beautiful land. True to his word, Quincy rode out at sunrise, pushing his horse hard to make the 3-hour journey to Custer in record time. He returned late that afternoon with both the doctor and Reverend Thomas, the circuit preacher who served the scattered ranches and small towns in the region. The doctor examined Jesse's leg and pronounced Olivia's work excellent, saying the bone was set as well as he could have done it himself. Jesse would need to stay off the leg for several weeks, but with proper care, he would make a full recovery. Jake could not stop thanking Olivia, his voice breaking with emotion as he shook her hand. When the medical examination was complete, Quincy drew Olivia aside. "Are you sure about this? We can wait if you want a proper wedding with a dress and guests and all the things women usually want." Olivia looked at him, at his honest, sun-bronzed face and worried green eyes, and knew she had never been more certain of anything. "I don't need any of that. I just need you." They were married that evening in the parlor with Pete, Jake, and Jesse as witnesses. Olivia wore her best dress, a simple gray silk she had brought from Philadelphia, and Quincy had bathed and shaved and wore a clean white shirt that made his eyes look impossibly green. The ceremony was short and simple, just the words that bound them together for life. And when Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Quincy kissed her with a tenderness that made her forget there were other people in the room. Pete produced a bottle of good whiskey he had been saving for a special occasion, and they toasted the newlyweds with cups and glasses scrounged from the kitchen. Jesse, still pale but grinning from his place on the sofa where they had made him comfortable, raised his cup with his brother and declared that he had never seen Quincy so happy. "You're good for him," Pete said to Olivia when the others were distracted. "He's been alone too long, carrying this place on his shoulders with nobody to share the burden. You'll make him happy. I can see it." That night, Quincy carried Olivia up the stairs to his bedroom, the master bedroom that had once belonged to his parents. It was larger than the room she had been using, with a big bed covered in quilts and windows that looked out over the ranch. He set her down gently, his hands lingering at her waist. "I know this isn't the wedding night you probably dreamed about when you were a girl," he said softly. "If you want to wait, if you need more time to be comfortable with all this, I understand." Olivia reached up and touched his face, loving the scratch of stubble under her fingers, the warmth of his skin. "I don't want to wait. I want to be your wife in every way. I want to start our life together right now." Quincy kissed her then with a passion that made her knees weak, and she responded with equal fervor, all the pent-up longing of the past 3 weeks pouring out as they finally allowed themselves to be together without barriers or hesitation. He was gentle with her, patient and careful, making sure of her comfort even as desire threatened to overwhelm them both. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, Olivia felt a completion she had never known before, as if she had found a piece of herself she had not known was missing. Later, lying in his arms with moonlight streaming through the windows, Olivia traced lazy patterns on Quincy's chest and felt him press a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "For what? For taking a chance on me. For saying yes. For making me the happiest man in Montana territory." He pulled her closer, tucking her against his side. "I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." "I could never regret this," Olivia said, tilting her face up to kiss him softly. "I love you, Quincy Young. You've given me a home and a purpose, and a future I never thought I would have. I'm the lucky one." They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for their future. Quincy told her about growing up on the ranch, learning the cattle business from his father, the hard years after he lost both parents and had to run the operation alone. Olivia told him about Philadelphia, about her father's business failure and death, her mother's remarriage to a man who made it clear her grown daughter was not welcome, the lonely years of feeling displaced and purposeless. "We're both orphans," Quincy said thoughtfully. "Both alone in the world until now." "Not alone anymore," Olivia corrected. "We have each other now." The next morning, Olivia woke to find herself alone in bed, but she could hear Quincy moving around downstairs. She dressed quickly and went down to find him in the kitchen, attempting to make coffee with comical incompetence. "I thought I'd let you sleep in on your first morning as Mrs. Young," he said sheepishly. "But I'm realizing I have no idea how you make coffee taste so good. Mine always comes out like mud." Olivia laughed and took over, shooing him away from the stove. "Go take care of your ranch, husband. I'll handle breakfast." The word husband made Quincy grin like a boy. He caught her around the waist and pulled her close for a long, deep kiss that made her forget about coffee entirely. When he finally released her, both of them were breathing hard. "If you keep kissing me like that, your men are going to go hungry," Olivia said, trying to sound stern but unable to keep the smile from her face. "Let them eat in town," Quincy said, nuzzling her neck in a way that made her shiver. But he did release her and head toward the door, settling his hat on his head. "Though I suppose that would start talk, the boss staying in on his first day of being married." After he left, Olivia prepared breakfast with a lightness in her heart she had never felt before. When Pete and Jake came in, they were both grinning and offering congratulations. Word had apparently spread fast, because several neighboring ranchers stopped by over the next few days to meet Quincy's new wife and offer their good wishes. Not everyone was pleased by the news. 3 days after the wedding, Catherine Sterling arrived at the ranch in a fury. Olivia was in the garden, working on the rose bushes, when she heard the sound of a horse being ridden hard. Catherine dismounted before the animal had fully stopped and stormed across the yard. "Is it true?" she demanded, her beautiful face twisted with anger. "Did Quincy actually marry you, the temporary housekeeper?" Olivia stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. "Yes, it's true. We were married 3 days ago." "You schemed this," Catherine accused, her voice rising. "You came here and set your cap at him, knowing he was supposed to marry me. You're nothing but a fortune hunter after his land and his money." "That's not true," Olivia said firmly, refusing to be intimidated. "I fell in love with your husband and he fell in love with me. His money and land had nothing to do with it." "Quincy!" Catherine shrieked toward the barn. "Quincy, get out here!" Quincy emerged from the barn, his expression darkening when he saw Catherine. He walked over to stand beside Olivia, his hand finding hers in a gesture of solidarity that made Catherine's eyes narrow with rage. "Catherine, you need to leave," Quincy said firmly. "Olivia is my wife. You need to respect that and accept it." "Your wife?" Catherine's laugh was bitter. "You've known her less than a month. What kind of woman agrees to marry a man that quickly? I'll tell you what kind, the desperate kind, the scheming kind. She's using you, Quincy, and you're too blind to see it." "Enough," Quincy said, his voice going hard in a way Olivia had never heard. "You don't know anything about Olivia or what's between us. I love her and she loves me, and that's all that matters. Now get off my property before I have Pete escort you off." Catherine's face went pale, then red with humiliation. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice shaking. "When you're stuck with some Philadelphia nobody who doesn't know the first thing about being a rancher's wife, when she runs back east at the first sign of hardship, you'll remember this moment and know you made a terrible mistake." She mounted her horse and rode off at a gallop, leaving a cloud of dust in her wake. Quincy pulled Olivia into his arms, feeling her tremble against him. "Don't listen to her," he said firmly. "She's just angry and hurt. She'll get over it." "What if she's right?" Olivia asked, voicing a fear she had been trying to ignore. "What if I can't handle this life? What if I'm not strong enough?" Quincy pulled back and looked at her seriously. "You set a man's broken leg by lamplight without flinching. You traveled halfway across the country alone to start a new life. You've worked harder in the past month than most society women work in a year. You're the strongest woman I know, Olivia. Don't let Catherine's jealousy make you doubt yourself." His confidence in her bolstered Olivia's spirits, and she pushed aside her worries. There would be challenges ahead, she knew, but they would face them together. The next few weeks fell into a happy rhythm. Olivia continued to run the household, but now it was her home, not just a temporary position. She put her own touches on the house, rearranging furniture and hanging curtains she sewed herself. The rose bushes began to bloom, filling the air with their sweet scent. And every night, she fell asleep in Quincy's arms, feeling safe and loved and more content than she had ever imagined possible. Spring roundup came, bringing long days of hard work for Quincy and his men. Olivia found herself cooking for not just the regular ranch hands, but also for the additional cowboys hired temporarily to help with the roundup. She baked bread and pies, made huge pots of stew and beans, and kept coffee brewing from dawn until late in the evening. It was exhausting work, but she loved being part of the operation, contributing to the ranch's success. One evening, as she was washing dishes after supper, Quincy came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You're amazing," he murmured. "I heard some of the temporary hands talking today. They said this ranch has the best food in all of Montana Territory and the prettiest boss's wife to boot." Olivia laughed, leaning back against him. "I doubt I'm the prettiest anything after cooking over a hot stove all day." "You're beautiful," Quincy said firmly, turning her around to face him. "Always beautiful to me, even when you have flour in your hair and grease on your apron." "I have flour in my hair." Olivia reached up self-consciously, and Quincy caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I have something to tell you," he said, suddenly serious. "I got word today that Martha's sister has recovered. She'll be heading back this way in about 2 weeks." For a moment, Olivia felt a flutter of panic. Martha returning meant her temporary position would be over, would mean she was no longer needed. Then she remembered that she was not the temporary housekeeper anymore. She was Quincy's wife. This was her home now, permanent and secure. "That's wonderful news," Olivia said, meaning it. She must be so relieved her sister is better. "I thought we could keep Martha on," Quincy said carefully. "Not as the housekeeper, since that's your role now, but maybe to help with the heavier work. You've been working yourself too hard, cooking for all these men. I don't want you to wear yourself out." Olivia considered this. She had been thinking the same thing, actually. The workload during Roundup was immense, and while she would never admit it to Quincy, she had been feeling exhausted by the end of each day. "I think that's a good idea," she said. "But I want to be clear with Martha that this is my house now. I don't want any confusion about roles." "It's your house," Quincy agreed, kissing her forehead. "Your home. And you're the boss when it comes to anything household-related. Martha will understand that." When Martha arrived 2 weeks later, she was a stout, practical woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She looked around the house with approval, noting all the changes Olivia had made. "You've done well here," Martha said, her tone respectful. "The place looks better than it has in years. And I heard you set young Jesse's leg when he got kicked. That takes courage and skill." "Thank you," Olivia said, relieved that Martha did not seem resentful about her change in status. "Mr. Young, I mean Quincy, thought you might be willing to stay on and help with the cooking and heavy cleaning." "I'd be grateful for the assistance," Martha smiled. "I'd be happy to help, Mrs. Young. This ranch has been my home for 5 years. I'm not eager to leave it. And I'll be honest, the idea of being responsible for everything was starting to wear on me. Splitting the work suits me just fine." The two women quickly developed an easy working relationship. Martha handled much of the daily cooking for the ranch hands, while Olivia focused on running the household and taking care of Quincy. She found she enjoyed the slightly lighter load, which gave her time to pursue other interests. She started a vegetable garden, planting seeds for tomatoes, beans, squash, and herbs. She began raising chickens for eggs and meat. She learned to ride, with Quincy patiently teaching her in the evenings, until she could accompany him on rides around the ranch. The land was even more beautiful from horseback, vast and wild and breathtaking in its scope. One afternoon, while Olivia was riding back from checking on the chickens, she saw Quincy in the north pasture having what looked like a heated discussion with Horace Kimball and several of his men. She rode closer, worried by the tension she could see in Quincy's posture. "I'm telling you for the last time, Kimball," Quincy was saying, his voice hard. "The creek is on my property and you have no right to redirect it. If I catch your men digging channels again, there will be trouble." "Trouble?" Kimball was a heavy-set man with a red face and mean eyes. "You threatening me, boy? I've got 20 men to your 3. You really want to make an enemy of me?" "I don't want to make an enemy of anyone," Quincy said evenly, "but I won't let you steal my water. My cattle need that creek to survive the summer." Kimball noticed Olivia then, his eyes narrowing as he looked her over. "So this is the little Philadelphia bride I've been hearing about. Heard you turned down Catherine Sterling for this one. Interesting choice." "My wife is none of your concern," Quincy said, moving his horse between Kimball and Olivia in a protective gesture that made her heart swell even as it worried her. "Everything on this range is my concern," Kimball said coldly. "You remember that, Young. You're new to this business. Your daddy might have known how to run a ranch, but you're still learning. Maybe you should consider my offer to buy you out. I'd give you a fair price, and you and your pretty wife could start fresh somewhere else." "This ranch isn't for sale," Quincy said flatly. "Not now, not ever. This is my home, my land, and I'm not going anywhere." Kimball shrugged. "Suit yourself, but don't come crying to me when you find yourself in over your head." He rode off with his men, leaving Quincy staring after them with a troubled expression. Olivia brought her horse alongside his and reached over to touch his arm. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. "Months," Quincy admitted. "Since before you arrived. Kimball wants to expand his operation and my ranch is in his way. He's been trying different tactics to push me out. First he tried to buy me out cheap, acting like he was doing me a favor. Then he started this business with the water, trying to make my operation fail. Now he's making vague threats. What are you going to do?" "What I've been doing. Stand my ground. This land is mine, legally and properly. I won't be bullied off it." He looked at her, his expression softening. "But I want you to be careful, Olivia. Don't ride out alone anymore. If Kimball is desperate enough, he might try something foolish." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine, but she nodded. "I'll be careful." "But Quincy, maybe we should contact the territorial marshal. If Kimball is making threats, there are legal protections. The nearest marshal is in Helena, 3 days' ride from here. By the time he got here, whatever's going to happen would have already happened." Quincy took her hand. "Don't worry. I'll handle Kimball. I just need you to stay close to the house and be aware." Despite his reassurances, Olivia could not shake her worry. That night, lying in bed, she held Quincy tighter than usual, suddenly aware of how precarious their happiness was. They had built something beautiful here, but the world they lived in was harsh and often lawless, where disputes were sometimes settled with violence rather than words. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "Please be careful." "I love you too," Quincy murmured back, his arms tightening around her. "I promise I'll be careful. I have too much to live for now to take stupid risks." The next few days passed tensely. Quincy posted one of his men near the creek at all times to watch for Kimball's men trying to redirect the water. He also rode into Custer to file a formal complaint with the local sheriff, though everyone knew the sheriff had limited power over disputes between ranchers. Then, on a hot afternoon in early June, trouble came to a head. Olivia was in the kitchen with Martha, preserving the season's first batch of strawberries, when they heard shouting from the yard. She ran to the window to see smoke rising from the direction of the north pasture. "Fire," Martha said grimly, coming to stand beside her. "And from the direction, I'd say it's your hayfield." Olivia ran outside to find Quincy already mounted, calling orders to Pete and Jake. Jesse, still recovering from his broken leg, was struggling to get up from where he had been resting on the porch. "Stay here," Quincy shouted to Olivia as he prepared to ride out. "Keep everyone near the house in case the fire spreads. Be careful." Olivia called after him, her heart in her throat as she watched him gallop away. The next few hours were agonizing. Olivia could see the smoke billowing into the sky, could smell it on the wind. She organized what she could from the house, preparing buckets of water and wet cloths in case the fire did reach the ranch buildings. Martha worked beside her grimly, both women too worried to speak much. It was late evening before the men returned, covered in soot and exhausted. Quincy slid from his horse and Olivia ran to him, not caring about the dirt and ash as she threw her arms around him. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough," Quincy said wearily. "We lost about 20 acres of hay, managed to stop it before it spread to the forest, which would have been a disaster. But that hay was supposed to feed the cattle through next winter." "How did it start?" Quincy's expression hardened. "It was set deliberately. We found evidence of accelerant, probably kerosene, at 3 different points. This wasn't an accident or a lightning strike. Someone started this fire on purpose." "Kimball," Olivia breathed. "I can't prove it," Quincy said bitterly. "But yes, I'd bet my ranch it was Kimball's men. This is his way of trying to force me out. Burn my hay, kill my winter feed, make it impossible for me to keep my cattle alive through the cold months. Then we fight back," Olivia said fiercely. "We don't let him win." Quincy pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I love your fighting spirit. But I don't know how we're going to replace that hay. It takes months to grow, and we don't have months." They went to bed that night exhausted and worried. But as Olivia lay in the darkness listening to Quincy's breathing slowly even out into sleep, an idea began to form in her mind. She spent the night turning it over, examining it from every angle, and by morning she had made a decision. After breakfast, while Quincy was out surveying the damage from the fire, Olivia asked Pete to saddle a horse for her. When he protested that Quincy had said she should stay near the house, she gave him a look that brooked no argument. "I'm going to visit Catherine Sterling," she said firmly. "And I'm going now." The Sterling Ranch was even more impressive than Quincy's, with a massive 2-story house and outbuildings that spoke of wealth and success. A servant answered Olivia's knock and looked surprised to see her, but ushered her into an elegant parlor to wait for Catherine. When Catherine appeared, her expression was cold. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," Olivia said directly. "About your father and Horace Kimball." Catherine's eyebrows rose. "What about them? They're business associates, aren't they?" "Your father does business with Kimball, sells him cattle and supplies." "What of it?" Catherine asked warily. "Yesterday someone set fire to our hayfield, burned 20 acres. Quincy thinks it was Kimball's men." Olivia watched Catherine carefully and saw something flicker in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or concern. "I'm here to ask if you knew anything about this." "Why would I know anything?" Catherine said defensively, but Olivia could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Because despite everything, I don't think you're the kind of person who would condone violence and destruction, Olivia said honestly. You were angry when Quincy married me, and you had every right to be angry if you had expectations about your future with him. But I don't think you would support Kimball trying to burn us out. Catherine was silent for a long moment, her face working through several emotions. Finally, she sat down abruptly on the sofa and gestured for Olivia to sit as well. I didn't know about the fire, she said quietly. But I knew Kimball was pressuring Quincy. My father mentioned it, said Kimball was determined to acquire the Young ranch one way or another. I thought it was just business talk, the usual posturing men do. I didn't realize it had gotten violent. It has, Olivia said. And if it continues, someone could get seriously hurt or killed. Catherine, I know you have no reason to help me or Quincy, but I'm asking you anyway. If your father has any influence over Kimball, could he use it to make him back off? Catherine looked at her searchingly. Why should I help you? You took the man I was supposed to marry. Because it's the right thing to do, Olivia said simply. And because, despite what you think, Quincy was never yours to take. He told me he and you were never courting, that any expectations were your father's idea, not his. You deserve better than a man who doesn't love you, Catherine. You deserve someone who looks at you the way Quincy looks at me. But more than that, you deserve to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you're a good person who does the right thing. There was another long silence. Then Catherine stood and walked to the window, looking out over her father's vast ranch. My father won't help, she said finally. He and Kimball are too close, and he thinks Kimball's expansion is good for the region. But I know things about Kimball's operation that he wouldn't want made public. Shady business dealings, questionable cattle acquisitions, workers who have disappeared under suspicious circumstances. If I threaten to expose those things, he might back off. That could put you in danger, Olivia said, standing as well. Catherine turned to face her, and for the first time, Olivia saw genuine respect in her eyes. Maybe, but you were right. I don't want to be the kind of person who stands by while someone commits violence and destruction. I was angry about Quincy, but I'm not angry enough to wish harm on him or his ranch. She paused. He's happy with you, isn't he? Yes, Olivia said softly. Very happy, and I'm happy with him. Good, Catherine said, and seemed to mean it. Then I'll do what I can about Kimball. I can't promise anything, but I'll try. Olivia rode back to the ranch feeling lighter than she had in days. She told Quincy about her visit, expecting him to be angry that she had gone against his wishes, but instead he pulled her into his arms and held her tight. You're incredible, he said into her hair, and brave and clever, and I don't know what I did to deserve you. You were yourself, Olivia said simply. That's all you had to do. A week later, word reached them that Horace Kimball had abruptly ceased his harassment of the Young ranch. He had even sent a begrudging message acknowledging Quincy's water rights and promising to respect the property boundaries. The change was so dramatic and unexpected that Quincy knew Catherine must have made good on her promise. I should thank her, he said to Olivia. I already did, Olivia replied. I sent her a note and a basket of preserves. I thought it was better coming from me. As summer progressed, life on the ranch settled into a peaceful rhythm. The burned hayfield was a loss, but Quincy was able to negotiate with neighboring ranchers to purchase enough hay to get through the next winter. The cattle thrived on the good grazing, and Quincy's small herd grew with the addition of several strong calves. In early August, Olivia realized her monthly courses had not come. At first she thought it was just the stress and hard work, but when another month passed, she knew. She was pregnant with Quincy's child. She told him one evening after supper, when they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. She had been nervous about how he would react, worried that a baby so soon might be too much added responsibility when they were still establishing their life together. But when she said the words, Quincy's face lit up with such pure joy that all her worries melted away. He pulled her into his lap, holding her carefully as if she were made of glass, and pressed his hand gently to her still flat stomach. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby." "Olivia, this is the best news I could imagine." "You're not worried?" she asked. "About the added expense, the work?" "Worried," Quincy laughed. "I'm thrilled. I've always wanted a family, children to pass this ranch on to teach and love and watch grow. And now that's going to happen with you, the woman I love more than anything in this world. How could I be anything but happy?" That night, lying in bed with Quincy's hand resting protectively on her belly, Olivia reflected on how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been alone and hopeless in Philadelphia, with no prospects and no future. Now she was married to a wonderful man, living in a beautiful place, and expecting a child. It seemed almost impossible that so much happiness could come from answering a simple advertisement for a temporary housekeeper. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall. Olivia continued to work, though Quincy and Martha both insisted she take it easier as her belly grew. By October, she was showing clearly, and the ranch hands treated her with a gentle deference that made her laugh. Jesse, fully recovered from his broken leg, appointed himself her personal assistant, always ready to carry heavy loads or help with any task she needed. "You saved my leg," he told her when she protested that he was fussing too much. "Least I can do is make sure you and that baby are taken care of." November brought the first heavy snows, transforming the ranch into a winter wonderland. Olivia stood at the window one morning, watching Quincy and the men working in the cold, and felt a surge of contentment. This was her home now, this wild and beautiful place. These were her people. This life, so different from anything she had imagined for herself, was exactly where she belonged. Catherine Sterling stopped by one afternoon in December, driving a small sleigh pulled by a matched pair of horses. She had a gift for Olivia, a beautifully sewn baby quilt made from soft fabrics in shades of blue and yellow. "I made it myself," Catherine said, a bit shyly. "I wanted you to know that I harbor no ill will. You were right, what you said about deserving someone who looks at me the way Quincy looks at you. I've been courting with Thomas Crawford, who owns the ranch on the other side of town. He's a good man, and he sees me for who I am, not just as a means to expand his property. I wanted to thank you for helping me see that I deserved better." "I'm so happy for you," Olivia said sincerely, admiring the quilt. "And this is beautiful, thank you." After Catherine left, Quincy came in from the cold and found Olivia folding the quilt carefully, tears running down her cheeks. "What's wrong?" he asked in alarm, hurrying to her side. "Nothing's wrong," Olivia said, laughing through her tears. "I'm just happy, so incredibly, impossibly happy. And apparently pregnancy makes me cry at the smallest things." Quincy kissed her tears away and held her close, careful of her rounded belly. "I'm happy too," he said softly, "more than I ever thought possible." In late February, during a brief warm spell that melted some of the snow and gave everyone hope that spring was coming, Olivia went into labor. Martha and Quincy were both there, along with the doctor from Custer, who Quincy had convinced to stay at the ranch for the last few weeks of the pregnancy, just in case. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Quincy held Olivia's hand the entire time, wiping her forehead with cool cloths and whispering encouragement. When the baby finally came, letting out a strong, healthy cry that echoed through the house, both Olivia and Quincy were crying too. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Olivia's chest. A big, healthy boy. Olivia looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect fingers and scrunched-up face, and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it almost frightened her. Quincy leaned over them both, his finger gently touching the baby's soft cheek, and she saw the same overwhelming emotion reflected in his eyes. "What should we name him?" she asked softly. Quincy was quiet for a moment, then said, "James. After my father, James Young, if that's all right with you." "James," Olivia repeated, testing the name. "James Young. It's perfect." The first few weeks with a newborn were exhausting but joyful. Martha was invaluable, helping with the household work so Olivia could focus on the baby. Quincy was a devoted father, getting up with her for midnight feedings and spending hours just holding his son, watching him sleep with an expression of wonder on his face. "I never knew I could love something this much," he confessed one night, gently rocking James while Olivia tried to get a few hours of sleep. "I thought I understood love when I married you, but this is different. It's like my heart has grown bigger to make room for all this feeling." "I know exactly what you mean," Olivia said, watching her husband and son with tired, happy eyes. "It's terrifying and wonderful all at once." Spring came, bringing new life to the ranch. The cattle that had survived the winter were healthy and strong, the fields greened up beautifully, and Quincy's careful management paid off with a successful calving season. With the extra money from selling cattle, he was able to hire 2 more permanent ranch hands, easing the workload on everyone. James grew from a tiny newborn into a robust, happy baby who smiled at everyone and loved to be outside. Quincy would often carry him around the ranch, showing him the horses and cattle, talking to him about the land and the work as if he could understand every word. "You're going to spoil him," Olivia teased one afternoon, watching Quincy let the 6-month-old James help him brush down a horse. "That's a father's prerogative," Quincy replied with a grin. "Besides, it's never too early to learn the family business." One evening in July, almost exactly a year after Olivia had first arrived at the ranch, she and Quincy sat on the porch with James between them, watching the sun set over the mountains. It had become their evening ritual, this quiet time together as a family, watching the day end and the stars begin to emerge. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Quincy asked, a question he had never posed before. Olivia considered it seriously before answering. "I miss certain things. Good bookstores, the theater, restaurants, but the life I had there. No, that Olivia was lost and lonely and had no real purpose. This Olivia, the one who lives on a Montana cattle ranch with her husband and son, who can set a broken bone and birth a calf and bake bread that makes grown men weep with joy. She's the real me. The me I was always meant to be." "I'm glad you came here," Quincy said softly. "I'm glad you answered that advertisement. I'm glad you said yes when I proposed after less than a month. I'm glad for every choice that brought us to this moment." "So am I," Olivia said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "So am I." 2 years later, Olivia gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Alina, who had their father's green eyes and their mother's dark hair. The house that had once seemed so large and empty was now filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing. James, at 3 years old, took his role as big brother seriously, always watching out for his little sisters and trying to teach them things they were too young to understand. Quincy expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land when it became available, and building up one of the most successful cattle operations in Montana territory. But no matter how busy he became, he always made time for his family, coming in for supper every evening and spending his Sundays with Olivia and the children, teaching them to ride and showing them the land that would one day be their inheritance. Catherine Sterling married Thomas Crawford in a beautiful ceremony that Olivia and Quincy attended as guests. The former rivalry was completely forgotten, replaced by a genuine friendship between the two couples. Their children would grow up together, playing at each other's ranches and forming bonds that would last their entire lives. Pete, faithful old Pete, lived to see his 82nd birthday, still working cattle almost until the end. When he passed peacefully in his sleep one winter night, the entire community came to his funeral. He was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch he had loved, and Quincy carved the headstone himself with the simple inscription, "Pete, a good man and a true friend." Jake and Jessie Miller both married local girls and built small spreads of their own on land they purchased with money they had saved from working for Quincy. They remained close to the Young family, their children growing up alongside James, Emma, and Alina. Martha continued to work for the family until she was too old to do the heavy labor anymore, at which point Olivia insisted she stay on as a beloved member of the household, a grandmother figure to the children who adored her stories of the old days. The years passed in a blur of seasons, of spring roundups and summer work and autumn harvests and winter snows. James grew into a tall, capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. The twins, inseparable as always, were spirited girls who could ride as well as any boy and weren't afraid of hard work. On a warm evening in September, 20 years after Olivia had first arrived at the ranch, she and Quincy sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, just as they had done thousands of times before. Their children were grown now, James running much of the day-to-day operations of the ranch while courting a sweet girl from town, the twins away at school in Helena but coming home for Christmas. 20 years, Quincy said, taking Olivia's hand. His hair was threaded with silver now, and there were lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, but to Olivia he was just as handsome as the day she had first met him. 20 wonderful years, Olivia agreed. Her own dark hair had streaks of gray, and her hands bore the marks of decades of hard work, but she had never felt more beautiful than when Quincy looked at her with the same love and desire he had shown on their wedding night. "You remember when I proposed to you after less than a month?" Quincy asked with a smile. "Everyone thought I was crazy." "You were crazy," Olivia said, laughing. "We both were. Who gets married after knowing each other less than a month? People who recognize their soulmate when they find them," Quincy said seriously. "People who understand that when something is right, truly right, you don't waste time waiting. I knew you were meant to be mine from almost the first moment. I would have proposed after a week if I thought you'd say yes." "I would have said yes," Olivia confessed. "Even though I tried to tell myself I was being practical and sensible, my heart knew the truth. I loved you from the very beginning." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. A horse whinnied from the barn. The familiar sounds of the ranch settling in for the night surrounded them like a lullaby. "I've been thinking," Quincy said eventually. "James is ready to take over more of the ranch management. And the girls will be finished with school soon. Maybe it's time we took that trip you've been wanting. Go back to Philadelphia, show you the city again after all these years. Maybe even travel to San Francisco, see some of the country we've never explored." Olivia squeezed his hand. "That sounds wonderful, but you know what? As much as I'd enjoy seeing new places, I'm not in any hurry to leave. This is home. This ranch, these mountains, this life we've built together. I have everything I need right here. Even without fancy bookstores and theaters," Quincy teased gently. "Even without those," Olivia confirmed. "Although we have made progress, Custer actually has a decent library now thanks to that fundraising campaign, and the traveling theater company comes through every summer. It's not Philadelphia, but it's ours. It's perfect. As darkness fell and stars began to emerge in the vast Montana sky, Olivia thought about the young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach 20 years ago, nervous and uncertain, but determined to make a new life for herself. That woman had no idea what waited for her, could never have imagined the love and happiness and adventure that lay ahead. She had come west as a temporary housekeeper and found so much more, a home and a family and a love that had sustained her through 2 decades of joy and struggle, triumph and heartbreak, laughter and tears. "What are you thinking about?" Quincy asked, always attuned to her moods. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am," Olivia said honestly, "for all of it. The good and the hard, the easy days and the difficult ones. For you, most of all, for taking a chance on a housekeeper from Philadelphia and seeing something in her worth keeping." "I'm the grateful one," Quincy said, pulling her close. "You saved me, Olivia. I didn't realize how lonely I was, how much I needed someone, until you came into my life and filled all the empty spaces. You made this house a home. You gave me a family. You gave me a reason to build something that would last beyond my own lifetime. Every good thing in my life came from the day I posted that advertisement for a temporary housekeeper, and you were brave enough to answer it." They kissed then, a gentle kiss that held 20 years of love and devotion and partnership. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "Come on," Quincy said, standing and offering her his hand. "It's getting cold. Let's go inside." But before they went in, Olivia paused and looked out over the ranch one more time. The house, glowing with lamplight from within. The barn where the horses stamped and settled for the night. The wide expanse of land stretching to the mountains, land they had worked and protected and loved. The rose bushes by the porch, descendants of the original plants she had revived all those years ago, still blooming faithfully every spring. This was her legacy, she thought. Not just the land or the house or even the children they had raised. It was the life they had built together, the love that had started so quickly and improbably, but had only grown stronger with time. It was proof that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances, from being brave enough to step into the unknown, from saying yes when everything logical says you should say no. She had arrived as a temporary housekeeper. Quincy had proposed before the month was over. And in doing so, they had both found exactly what they were looking for, even though neither had known what that was until they found it in each other. 25 years after that first meeting, Olivia and Quincy celebrated their anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the community they had helped build. The ranch was thriving, passed down to James, who ran it with the same dedication his father had shown. The twins, both married now, lived nearby with their own families. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Olivia found a quiet moment alone with Quincy. They stood in the same spot where he had first told her he loved her, where he had proposed, where they had shared countless conversations over the years. "No regrets?" Quincy asked, though his smile suggested he already knew the answer. "Not a single one," Olivia said firmly. "You." "Only that I didn't find you sooner," Quincy replied, kissing her forehead. "But I'll take the years we had and be grateful for every moment." As they walked hand in hand into the house they had shared for a quarter century, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and love well given, Olivia felt a profound sense of peace. She had taken a chance on a wild, uncertain future and been rewarded beyond measure. The temporary housekeeper had found a permanent home, and in doing so had discovered that home was not just a place but a person, Not just walls and roof, but love and commitment and partnership. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren, who never tired of hearing about the woman who traveled from Philadelphia, and the rancher who knew his own heart well enough to propose before the month was over. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, tested by hardship and blessed by time. Proof that sometimes the best things in life happen when you least expect them, and have the courage to embrace them when they come.